A seasoned entrepreneur, growth strategist, and investor, Brad Costanzo has been described as a powerful catalyst who brings innovation, clarity, and brilliance to business challenges. He is the CEO of Costanzo Marketing Group, principal of Costanzo Capital, and the host of the award-winning podcast Bacon Wrapped Business, where he uncovers what's working now with some of the top business experts in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Brad Costanzo. Brad Costanzo, I am so happy to have you here on this summit for multiple reasons. One, you're a dear friend of mine. Two, you have come through various speaker training with Sean. And three, you just have a ton of expertise in this topic. So I want to just dive right in. First off,
thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. One of the things that we're going to talk about today, actually 7 things, 7 ways that you can stand out in a crowded marketplace. Now, here's why you're brilliant at this, because you get it from multiple different angles, most especially probably as marketing. Let's talk about that. What are some of those ways that you can stand out?
Cool. So, this is one of those things that, because I've worked with a lot of companies as a consultant. I've worked with everybody from companies who run agencies to software to sell physical products and e-commerce. But I've worked with a lot of personal brands and speakers and coaches and consultants and people who are really trying to sell their expertise in a way that, they can, whether it's through a speech or et cetera, and they can really make a business around it. Now, one of the great things about that industry is that it's very easy to get into. If you can help somebody get a result and you can start to become a coach, consultant, advisor, speaker, there's a very low barrier to entry. But because of that, it gets really crowded a lot, and it can be really hard to stand out and not just be seen as another consultant, another life, health, relationship coach or something of that nature, because it's like, okay, well, everybody's teaching me how to get X result. How do I rise above that? And how do I get noticed? How do I get, remembered? And in marketing, there's a time, ancient time tested formula called AIDA, which is attention, interest, desire, and action. And if you can't get somebody to take action and like give you money, book you for a speech, etc., unless you can get them really to desire you. But in order to get them to desire you, you have to get their attention first and then build up enough interest. It's one thing to just get somebody's attention, but it's like, I could clap my hands really loud, I got your attention, but if I don't follow that up with something, you're going to go look at somewhere else. So when I was working with clients, I started to really go, how are all the ways that we can stand out? Because you'll hear a lot of people say, well, what's your unique mechanism, unique selling proposition, or what's your signature solution? And I've heard that a lot, and that's a very important piece, but there's actually a lot more to it. And as I started to go through it, I came up with, I guess it's 7 or 7.5 ways to stand out in a crowded market. And I'll kind of go through those. I've got a short list of these that I use in my own practice with my own clients. This is not this is a private working document that I'm happy to do a screen share if you think your audience would like to see it.
I think they would be very delighted to see it, because
Cool.
more like tactile, strategic stuff that we can talk about, I think the better.
Cool. And I went through and because I knew we were going to be doing this, I tried to blow these up just a little bit. But I'm using a collapsible outline format called Workflowy, which I'm a big fan of. But the way you're going to see me talk about this is I'm going to expand and contract these. Okay, so these will all apply, as I said, across any business, but especially if you're a personal brand, some are going to be more applicable than others. Now, there's some typical general ways. This is the 0.5, I guess, to stand out in a crowded market. You can be the cheapest. You can be the most expensive. You can be the rarest. You can be the most specific, or you can spend the most money on advertising and awareness, right? Like Coca-Cola is a great soda if you drink that, but they also spend the most money on advertising and awareness. And if you've got that capital, billboards and, YouTube ads and Facebook ads galore. Well, most of us have a hard time either spending the most money, being the rarest, most expensive, or cheapest. So aside from those, what can we do? Now, some of these are going to be really fundamental, and you'll get it. But as a little guy once told me, who I know you know, he goes, and he taught me how to actually start a speech like this, which was, you know, the difference between a master and a novice. When a novice hears something he already knows, he's like, man, I already know that.
I know that.
And when a master hears it, he goes, thanks for the reminder.
Yep.
Brought to you by the one and only Sean Stevenson during my training with him in Standing Ovation Secrets. That being said, there'll be some fundamental things that you might already know. I'm going to try to give you some nuances you may not have considered. Okay, so let's look at this. Social proof and endorsements. So social proof could be a large social media following. You could have a lot of people, you know, Facebook fans. You could have a lot of YouTube subscribers, etc. You could have authoritative endorsements like celebrities and influencers or thought leaders who are saying, Brad Costanzo is the best and he's awesome and I love working with him, etc. Right? So this is social proof. I'm surrounded by people. I work with people, etc. I've worked with Sean Stevenson. I must be a great speaker, and etc. And maybe those come in the form of glowing testimonials. There's a lot of ways to get social proof and endorsements. You can buy it, you can build it, you can borrow it. So buying it is like buying fake fans and followers. I don't recommend doing that, right? But I'm not going to go through every single one of these because we're a little bit limited on time, but you can buy it. The best way not the best way, the tried and trusted ways to build it, put out great content, consistently share your wins, create value and desire. If you've helped celebrities or influencers, do case studies that publicize this. But the last one is borrow it. So I'm borrowing your social proof and endorsement right now, Mindie. You're extremely well respected. You're building this audience. You've got people watching this, and I'm showing up to get access to your audience and to help get exposure to them by adding value to you. And as I said here, an example is if you were to get interviewed on an authoritative platform, etc., I can use their social influence and that rubs off. So look for opportunities to either build your social proof or borrow it. That's just one. Number two is, instead of social proof, demonstrable proof and results. Like, can you show that this is better, more effective, etc.? This is demonstrable proof is one of those things that in, let's say if you're a speaker, if you can show maybe a really packed crowd that you were responsible for bringing in. Like, listen, people came to see me speak, right? I'm trying to think of in terms of for speakers and thought leaders I know your audience. If you're in the physical product business, this is one example would be, do you remember the Crazy Glue? Do you remember the Crazy Glue ad where he did this?
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people do, right? He put Crazy Glue, he put himself up there. Now that is, I am showing you that this works. Like, holy crap, this is effective. Little bit harder to do for like speakers and thought leaders, but still, if you can, it's one of the strongest things you can do. Like multi-billion dollar products, infomercials, etc., have been built on the back of demonstrable proof. Goodwill, helpful content. Now, this is something that everybody on here should be pretty familiar with and doing all the time. As they say, content is king, and the best content actually helps people get results. And by putting your content and advertising out there, you're receiving the goodwill. They come to know you, they come to like you, they come to trust you, and you don't have to solve every single one of their problems for free. But if you can move them a couple inches closer to the goal line than they were before, they're going to get a result. They're much more likely to give you more of their attention, right? Frank Kern calls this results in advance. Eben Pagan used to call this moving the free line forward. But one of the best ways to do this, as I mentioned here, is like to really understand the customer's journey that they're on when they're trying to achieve a result. And that's like, this is the state I'm in and this is the state I want to be in. Well, there's a lot of ways to get that, but what's the very first step? And if you can help people move from point A to point B and then B to C, and just do that constantly, showing up by being somebody that they can get to know, they can start to like, and then they can trust, then you're going to stand out. And one of the ways that you build that trust is that by giving them things that they can actually go out and apply and do and see those results, they're like, wow, this really works. I can trust this person, that they're not just giving me blind promises, etc. So Examples: social media posts, sharing some of your helpful content, free calls with prospective clients to help them before you ever try to sell them, publishing content on a blog, podcast, YouTube channel, other things. Like I've got a podcast that I pump out free information on all the time to build goodwill and to stand out. Webinars, you can teach a method to accomplish something, but then you can sell them either the next step or a done for you version. An example would be teach people how to get leads on LinkedIn, but then offer them a software or a service that automates it for them. But by teaching people, give them this for free, you're building goodwill because they'll like you. And if they get results, they'll probably come back for more. By the way, Mindie, if you ever want to stop me and drill down or get nuance or clarification on any of these, please pipe in and stop me. So
Yeah, I'm writing down some questions, so we'll circle
cool.
back, but I love this.
Cool. Now, this is the one that most people go to first. Like, what's your USP? And I have actually a big problem with the way most people define unique selling propositions. But that's also different than, there's a unique selling proposition. There's a unique mechanism, like what makes your product or service work better than somebody else. Like, well, I have a software that makes it work. Like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's your mechanism. Coaches and consultants often have a signature solution, process, or plan that they follow. Like step 1 is we do this, step 2 is we do this. And as long as you kind of name it and own it, that becomes your signature. So it sounds unique. You might be doing the exact same thing other people do, but it sounds unique. And this is what brings me to the problem I have with a lot of experts who talk about the importance of the USP is they put so much emphasis on unique. Like, Mindie, what makes your program unique? What makes your service unique? Well, truthfully, there's very few unique things in the world. Services, products, a lot of, like, what makes Coke really unique from Pepsi? I mean, there is a unique flavor, but they're pretty darn similar, right? I've reworded this to be what makes your product or service, what makes you, your product or service be perceived as different than the competition, and therefore perceived as better. Perceived is the word, because you don't have to be that different or be that better if you can be perceived to be different and better. Now, one of the examples that I like to use is also one of the big examples that people love using with a unique selling proposition, and that's Domino's Pizza. So a lot of us remember that Domino's used to have the USP of 30 minutes or free, 30 minutes or less, or it's free guaranteed. Okay. Now, that was only unique because they were saying it like that, like the phrasing was unique, but there could have easily been other pizza companies doing the exact same thing. It would not have violated any IP. They could have said, we'll deliver your pizza in a half an hour or less, or you won't pay a thing. Like,
Same thing.
There probably were some companies who did that, and they could have, and that therefore it would have negated the idea that Domino's was unique. Now, Domino's was first, and Domino's was succinct, and therefore it could be perceived to be better. But I mean, I think this is really important, and it's been important for me because I've struggled with this in my own life too, going, most of the stuff I teach is built on the backs of other people. Like, I don't have that many unique ideas or original ideas. How do I come out with this in a way that is perceived as unique, but isn't necessarily unique, right? Like, I put a little spin on it. One of the reasons this is important is because it gives people a memorable hook, like 30 minutes or less, or it's free guaranteed, right? When thinking about what to buy, and it allows them to not only remember you, but justify their decision with some compelling reasons, as well as talk about you to their friends and word of mouth. Because one of my favorite books on this concept is called Microscript Rules, or The Microscript Rules. And the idea behind a microscript is very similar to this, but they talk about it's not what people remember that matters, it's what people repeat. Because they may remember something, but if they don't repeat it, don't think about it, or don't think about you in those situations, you're losing out on a tremendous opportunity. There is the big idea framework, and a big idea framework, this goes into, this can get pretty detailed, but it really is just designed to be intellectually interesting, compelling, and curiosity driven. And it's not designed to sell, it's designed to make them go, tell me more, right? So an example could be in the name of your product. An example could be in, and I don't know if you guys still call it standing ovation secrets, but that's what I signed up with Sean, years ago. to learn when he's like, hey, I've got this program called Standing Ovation Secrets. Are
Except
you
it's
interested?
standing ovation
Standing
system.
Ovation system, right? Yeah. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. It made me go, well, what's that? Right? Like I kind of got it. Like I knew about what it was, but it made me go, huh, Standing Ovation system. That's interesting. It's compelling. Tell me more. And then he did. Right? So if you can have a big idea that can allow you to just create that curiosity hook and go, really? What is that? A good example, P90X. A lot of people are familiar with the home workout program. Their big idea was called muscle confusion. And a lot of people, if you've watched the infomercials, have seen that. They're like, P90X, helps you get shredded, blah, 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 using the power of muscle confusion. And it's designed to confuse you and go, well, what's muscle confusion? And then they support that. They go, well, our body adapts to workouts if we do the same ones over and over. Therefore, when it adapts, it burns less calories. So if you can confuse the body, and like what we do is we create a lot of different exercises every single day, your body never knows what's coming, so it never gets a chance to adapt and relax. Therefore, it stays in a high calorie burning, high metabolic state all the time. Now, that may not even be true. I don't know. I've actually heard that it's not true, but
Oh, really?
also heard that it is. Yeah, but I talk to marketers, and all marketers are liars.
That's
So,
true.
according to Seth Godin.
Exactly.
Anyway, I've heard that it's not really that true. I'm like, but I've also heard it is. It doesn't matter. It makes sense intellectually. I just connected the dots, and I go, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, if they're the only ones using, which they've trademarked, muscle confusion, they're the only ones who can sell that. What is unique? But tell me, what is unique, or what's the barrier to somebody else coming out with another product? It's called the 30-day never do another exercise twice routine. That
Right.
causes your body, is the exact same thing. But when you can put a moniker, a hook, an angle, or this big idea on it, that kind of makes people go, huh, I got that. I can understand it. Muscle confusion. It's very easy. More importantly, I can repeat it. I can go, oh, Mindie, you're trying to get in sick shape, et cetera. Have you heard of muscle confusion? I'll probably talk about the big idea before I'll talk about the product.
Totally.
Right. So, because we love talking about ideas. So if people can go into this and create one of these for their business, it's very powerful. But it's not the only thing to do. It can be one of the most complex and hair pulling, but there's some other ways to do this. So another one, the interesting character. Actually, you mentioned that you had Russell Brunson on not too long ago. And I know I've seen Russell talk about this. I've seen a lot of people talk about the concept of an interesting character. This is really about, why would people pay attention to you and your brand? And do you occupy a space in their mind that they can't forget or explain? Why they even like you so much? Like, what makes you interesting? And I actually just posted this on Facebook yesterday. I posted a little, or 2 days ago. I said, something about, we crave stories, but a bad story with great characters is a lot more interesting than a great story with really bland and dull characters.
Totally. Yes.
Right? Huge. So the character is more important than the story. And you hear there's a lot of this about story brand and tell the story and the hero's journey, et cetera. But Star Wars would have been a terrible movie if the characters weren't if they didn't cast the right people, but also build in the right quirks to all the people and how interesting they are. And there's a couple of ways to be an interesting character. And once more, interesting is not necessarily likable. It's interesting. It makes you remember, it's AIDA, get your attention. Now build their interest. And one way to do that is to be polarizing. And Howard Stern is a perfect example. Half the people love him, half the people hate him, but even the people who hate him pay attention to him because they almost get off on that. Like, oh, he makes me so mad. Rush Limbaugh, another example, right? Political pundits are perfect polarizing examples of this. Now, for me, I can't be polarizing because I don't want to be. I don't want to be hated by half the population just to be loved by the other population. And some people do, some people don't, but it's not the only other method. The other one takes a little bit more thought, and it still uses this polarizing concept, but as opposed to polarizing other people, it's all about polarizing the way that people see you on two axes. And this is called a character diamond. And if you just think of like a diamond with, you know, the top up front, etc. So Hollywood made this famous. They're the best in the world at building these characters. This is actually where I talked about here, you know, a poor story with great characters is better than a good story with poor characters. But when it comes to a character diamond, they use this concept to create these compelling characters that you love, even if you don't like them, because they're interesting. And one example on that is House. You ever seen the show House MD?
I love that show. Yeah.
Cool. So House has a very interesting, Dr. House has a very interesting character diamond. Up top, and I'm actually going to show you the way this works. Up top is your North Star point. This is the first thing people see or think about you, your primary trait. And for House, he's a doctor. He's a really smart, brilliant doctor, right? I actually use Superman here too, but I'm going to use House for this because he's not necessarily that likable of a guy,
No,
but
he's
he's
kind of an
really
asshole.
interesting. Yeah. Well, and that's actually the South point, right? Your weakness or your vulnerability. It could be just the exact opposite. This is not a science. This is an art, right? It could be the exact opposite. Like he's a brilliant scientist, but he's a total asshole. And he's like, man, why is he that way? Now, the East Point, so over on the right-hand side, maybe this is I've heard this called the hill you're prepared to die on. This is your non-negotiable belief. I was using the Superman examples here, and I'll say this, like Superman's superpowers, but then his weakness, his vulnerability is his kryptonite.
Right.
Okay? His non-negotiable belief is it's truth, justice, and the American way. The non-negotiable belief about House is that I believe any illness or sickness can be solved, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to solve it because I care that much.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the West Point on the other side is an interesting quirk or trait that it doesn't quite match or fit in with House. It's that, he's got a limp and he's addicted to, because he's got leg pain or back pain, and he's addicted to drugs. Like, why would they throw that he's addicted to drugs in there or to painkillers? He doesn't need to, but it makes him more interesting because it makes him less perfect. And Sean used to talk about this all the time, at least with 2 points, about, you want to have your you can probably even correct me on this because I may mess it up. I know the spirit of it, but what is your thing that makes you Superman? But what's also that humanizing element that makes people really relate to you, that global, like, oh, he's better than me in some areas, but he's just like me in a lot of others. That way I can relate to him. Right? Like, I don't remember what you guys called that, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, it's just the point of like, you can't show up as this perfect person on stage. You have to be human. You have to be real. You have to be authentic, which is exactly to your points here.
Right. Now, along with this Superman analogy, Supaloop, I call him, what's that interesting quirk or trait about Superman? And I want you to think about the Christopher Reeves version of Clark Kent. What's a quirk or trait that kind of comes to mind when you think of Christopher Reeves, assuming you've seen the old...
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a big Superman fan, so I'm not entirely clear.
Okay. So, but have you ever seen those older Superman movies in the 80s?
Long time ago, yes.
So Clark Kent, and this wasn't really until Christopher Reeves took over that this happened. He was a total nerd and he lacked confidence with Lois Lane. Like he was just a kind of a geeky goofball, totally quirky, even though he should have had swagger and confidence because he knows that, hey, underneath this suit, I'm Superman. Like Clark Kent should have been Bruce Wayne, right? Bruce Wayne was Batman by day, and then but like Bruce Wayne is this playboy billionaire. Superman had all the more reasons to act like the playboy billionaire, like arrogant, egotistical guy, because he was basically like a god on Earth, but he wasn't. He was totally quirky and weird and awkward, which made him really relatable as Clark Kent to the everyman, and the everyman, woman, etc., kind of feels that way, like awkward and unsure and unconfident in real life. But then when Superman opens it up, he gives us that, like, we put ourselves like, oh, I could be Clark Kent, and there's a Superman inside me. And that's like what makes him so interesting. So when you're doing this for yourself, what are you really known for? What's your vulnerability or weakness? What's your non-negotiable belief? And what's your interesting quirk or trait? Cool?
Very cool.
Awesome. But basically, I'll sum it up here. Each of these gives your audience, prospects, and customers something to remember, something to like, something to trust, and it's something to keep them guessing. So this is, I guess, something to remember. I don't know. Those don't match up. I thought it would be really cool if all four of those matched up because I put those together for myself. Anyway, let's get down to the last two, but not the least two. In fact, these are two of the more powerful. So empathetic bonding is simply a way of making your customers and prospects or people in the crowd, whether it's the audience of the speech or the person booking you as a speaker, feel as though you know them as good or better than they know themselves, saying the words in their head. Now, I call this a dominant emotional release. And I'm always looking for ways to do this with my clients through sales copy and messaging. And it's where you communicate their struggles and their wants as good or even better than they can themselves, to where like they had the feeling, but those feelings didn't have words. That's why we release it. It's like, oh my God, yes, they get me. That's exactly what I've been thinking. I haven't been able to
understand.
Yes. And when you can do that, as I said, it's a very emotional moment. It's not like if I just said, do you struggle to get, like, let's say all of your people are listening, want to be speakers or are speakers. Do you struggle to get speaking gigs?
And they will be like, yes, I do.
Yes, but that's not an emotional release. That's top of the mind.
Right.
But I don't have one, but if I dug deep and I pulled out a situation or an emotion that is underneath the surface about that, like that just makes them go, oh my God, yeah, like, yes, you get it. Like you've obviously been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've walked this path. Otherwise there's no way you would know that, right? That's not always true. Sometimes if you just think about the customer's journey in a very deep way, it's easy to come up with this. And it works because it's an emotional spike, and emotions are heavily tied to memories, right? And anytime you have a really highly emotional event, you remember that event more than anything else. It locks. And if I give you that event, if I say something and you're like, Brad, oh my God, yes, I am now associated with that memory and that emotional spike forever. You can't get me out of your head, right? I'm like a weed. You don't even need to water me. I just grow. So an example, back in 2009, another marketing guru and now friend of mine, Rich Sheffrin, I was in an event, and I was only in digital marketing business for about a year, and I was all by myself just working. And I complained that one day, even though I'd started a business and I was a solopreneur hustling to make money, I told my friend Shelly Ellis, who I remember everything about this moment. I was like, man, I feel like I'm only playing entrepreneur, but I'm not really running a business, or I'm not being an entrepreneur, I'm playing one. And the next day I received an email, which I still have saved, from 2009, back in 2009, where Rich Sheffrin's subject line was, "Are you playing business, Brad?"
And you're like,
to him, that was probably just a subject line he came out of his head, like one of 1,000. But to me, that was my although I had said it yesterday for the first time, and it was an emotional moment. I'm like, how did you just read my brain? And I opened the email, I clicked on what, almost without reading, I may have read the entire words, I don't know. And I bought $2,000. I didn't care what he was selling.
Right,
I was like,
exactly.
You get me. He gets me. So a how-to on this, I'll run through these. It's accomplished with your sales copy and messaging. This is one of the harder things to do because it takes a lot of sitting down and thinking. The more experience you have, maybe the better you'll be at it. But you must understand your customer, their journey, their wants, their needs, obstacles, pains, and desires. There's innovation theory. Like this gets a little bit more advanced, but there's something called customer jobs to be done theory, customer journey mapping, just doing surveys, calling your customers and talking to them, interviewing them, getting to know them inside and out. It's extremely valuable. Okay, so now that brings me, and I'm hustling through this because I don't want to run out of time with this.
You're good.
Cool. So the last one is one of my favorite. I believe it's one of the most elusive and harder to do, but it pays such big dividends when you do it right. And it's so much fun when you get it. So this is about providing really powerful epiphanies and revelations to your audience. And by the way, one of the first people who did this to me and also got me kind of down that path was I'd mentioned Rich Sheffrin in the previous one about empathetic bonding. He was really great at this. And I remember thinking about that, and I've kind of hopefully taken it to other levels. And I'll just kind of read through a little bit of this, but similar to the empathetic bonding, it's really about helping people see things in a new way, like a new perspective. And if it can change their beliefs about something, even a little bitty belief, you can change their actions and then lead them to a better, quicker result. And I think we've all had epiphanies and revelations. And epiphany is something that we have. Like, I can lead you to an epiphany, but I can't tell you.
Right.
Like, I can tell you something, but until you actually it clicks, it's that clicking moment. You're like, now I get it.
Get it.
Like, how many times, I mean, you've coached so many people. How many times have you've probably been on both sides of this. Like, you just keep telling people what to do and they don't do it. Like, if you just did this and then one moment it clicks, like, what made that click?
Yeah.
Right. And, beliefs are one of the hardest things to change in somebody. It's rarely ever done with logic, and facts, because we protect our beliefs, or we protect our perspectives and our paradigms, because they inform how we see the world. And when those get upset, unless they're replaced with a better, more powerful belief, we're going to cling to the old ones. So one of the best ways to do that is not to tell somebody what to do. It's to draw the dots, then give them the pen and kind of nudge them along and encourage them to see and connect the dots themselves. Because when it's their revelation, it's a lot more powerful for them personally. And this is the way, like, psychotherapy often works. Like a psychiatrist, if you've ever been to a therapist, they go, they often aren't telling you what to do. They just sit back and ask you questions. Well, how does that make you feel? Have you ever considered this? Right. Yeah. And so the right questions are a great way to elicit this. I'll kind of get down to this here on how to do it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking about with coaching. I'm like, I don't ever sit there and like, even if I know what that person should do, I'm not going to be like, here's what you should do, because then there's resistance. There's all this other bullshit that comes up. It's question, question, question. And then they're like, oh, you know what? It's like, yeah, I maybe did know that, but now you know it, which is the point.
Exactly. And you know what, the reason this is so powerful is exactly the same reason that the empathetic bonding is, because it's an emotional experience. Anytime you have a eureka, it's like, I've been working on this, boom. It's also a dominant emotional release. These two are very tied together, but it's like, boom, that's it. You gave me the idea, and it could have been a book you read. It could have been anything, but the minute that clicks, that's easy to recall. And you have instantaneous credibility. Even if you didn't tell me what to do, you just were there when I figured it out.
Yeah.
That's why actually a client of mine said something really cool about me when we were talking, and he's like, he goes, I think I asked him, why is it that you actually, like, what's the most value you get out of working with me? He goes, that's a good question. We've done so much. I can't think of like one thing that you're particularly better at than others, et cetera. But he goes, you're really smart, but it's not even that you just say smart things. It's that smart things happen when we're together, right? It's like a catalyst for that. Because he knows, he goes, I think better when I'm working with you. And he goes, I don't know why that is or what it is, but, and I do, because I try to elicit these epiphanies and revelations on purpose for him by not necessarily telling him what to do, but framing it in a way that he starts to figure it out himself. So yeah. I'm very manipulative with my proactive work. Okay. So a couple quick examples. 4-Hour Workweek, Tim Ferriss, got me into digital marketing. Now, the epiphanies that I had, it introduced me to this world of online and information marketing. It introduced me to this concept that you can use cheaper overseas labor, like in India or the Philippines, et cetera, as virtual assistants. I didn't even know that was possible. And I'm like, now in this case, I didn't connect the dots. He connected them, but he introduced me to something I didn't know. It's like a new discovery, like epiphanies, revelations, and discoveries. I guess I should add that. He introduced me to the idea of lifestyle design using stories and metaphors, et cetera. And then he showed me a new perspective on the word rich when he talked about old rich versus new rich. And this is what the new rich do. They value experiences over things and time over stuff, et cetera. Another epiphany I had, MJ DeMarco wrote a book called Millionaire Fastlane. And he asked the question, which was, a lot of people think that get rich quick doesn't exist, but they're confusing it with its evil cousin, get rich easy. The difference is you have to change your definition of the word quick. Because if you, let's say you own a business and you work hard for 5 years and then you sell your business for millions of dollars, but you worked 18-hour days and blood, sweat, and tears. Well, compared to waiting 40 years to save millions of dollars, did you get rich quick? Is that quick or not? And what he made me, and he did it in a form of a question, and it made me go, I'll be damned. Quick has a different definition. It's all relative. It's not overnight, but 5 years is a lot quicker than 40. So, okay, I guess get rich quick does exist. And then he went on to explain, okay, in order for that to happen, you need to have a business that you can then sell for millions of dollars. And then that went on, that was the whole premise of his book, was create a business in order to sell it. Cool?
Very cool.
All right. Now, how to do this? There's a few ways. Ask those probing questions that allow other people to connect the dots. Don't give them the answer, but perhaps make several answers available and then ask them, oh, what do you think is the best idea? Which direction should you take? You can give them 2 equally great ones and then just ask them what they think is better. Allow them to say, yeah, I think this one. And then if it works, guess what? Like, they made the decision, but you led the horse to water. They'll never forget the one who pointed out the oasis. People love being told, or they hate being told what to do, but we love having ideas, even if they aren't really our ideas. We love ideas because it's not an idea, and advice is different. I can give you advice of what to do, but I could also give you a few ideas that if you tried this or that, maybe that'll work for you. Now you get to play with ideas. We don't get to play with advice. We get to play with ideas. One of my favorites is metaphors. They are so powerful. Because when you can say that this is like that and it makes logical sense, you don't necessarily have to explain it further. You don't have to explain a well-done metaphor. You don't have to explain the moral of the story. They get it. And Robert Cialdini, the author of Influence and Persuasion, talks about how whenever we hear a sales pitch or argument or sales letter or video, our subconscious is looking for things to argue with because it's trying to protect us from and keep us safe from making the wrong decision. So if you make a claim, we're immediately looking for either proof it's real or we start to assume that you're full of crap. And he goes, there's only 4 things that the human mind subconsciously does not counter argue. Metaphors are 1, stories, visuals, and music. So music and visuals are kind of interesting. Like if I see it, I believe it, or something like that. Or if you're trying to lead somebody down an emotional thing, like you play music during a movie or whatever, we don't say, oh, they're trying to make us sad. I don't want to feel sad in here during the sad music. We just go with it. But the more important things are metaphors and stories. If I say, and I don't really know what metaphor to use as an example here, but this is a lot like that because X, Y, and Z. And if it makes sense, all it has to do is make sense. And they'll go, okay, I see what you mean. Because the goal there is to just see what they mean and to make the metaphor make sense. They don't typically counter argue it. And if you tell a story that demonstrates something, we get so lost in the story, especially if there's good characters, that we don't counter argue the claims or the assertions that are being made. So using metaphors and stories in your speeches, in your marketing, in your et cetera, is so super powerful. And here's a real simple process. What does the customer want? What do they want? They want to lose weight. All right, cool. What do they want to avoid? And I put he, she, they, whatever. Why does he want it? What will getting it do for him? Then drill down as deep as possible, right? We're going for, what do they want? What are those emotional ties? Now, why do they, what do they believe is true about their current situation, about their desired situation? And then you want to ask, is this actually true or is there more to the story here? Because another really good epiphany is if you can show somebody that their problem is actually not their problem. Their problem is a symptom of a different problem they have. And ideally that other problem is easier for you to solve. And they go, oh man, I've been trying to solve the wrong problem the whole time. You showed me that it's a different problem. Thank you, Mindie. Right?
You're welcome.
Yeah. Now the last 2 here is like, why do they believe they don't have it yet? Is that actually true? And if it's not, like this is the same thing here. Is that the real problem? And I just repeat this until I kind of get to the root cause. And you don't even have to go too deep. If I just tell you, if you say, listen, I'm overweight, I'm trying to lose, like my problem is I'm fat and I'm overweight and, you know, et cetera. It's like, okay, is that really your problem or is that a symptom of other problems?
Right.
They go, well, I don't know. Well, do you own a gym membership? Do you this? Like, no. Well, do you go to the gym? No. Do you think that maybe going to the gym
Maybe.
might help? Right. And you ask it, you don't say, well, get your ass to the gym. You go, well, do you think that maybe if you did that and just did this, do you think that that would get you further or, you know, et
Yeah, like,
cetera,
would that help in this
closer?
situation? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm just asking, what do you think? And they go, okay, well, yeah, you're right. All right. So that's just that's kind of a super pedestrian example. And then I always search for metaphors. What is this problem like? What is this solution like? And what are the symptoms of this problem like? And this is not always easy. And oftentimes it'll happen to me if I'm in the, you know, I have one of those epiphanies or eureka moments in the shower or for a walk. And I go, oh man, I got it. This is a lot like that. And therefore, boom, there's my, you know, there's my point.
So Brad, this has been awesome. I think it's super helpful not only to have you talk through all these things, but to see it visually. Tell me this.
Yes.
When Sean initially was talking to you about joining Standing Ovation system, and I don't even know what the cost was back then, it was like $4 or $5 grand,
Yeah, I think it was 4.
something like that. Your hesitation was, but I don't have a fancy story. I don't have
Yeah.
something traumatic that happened to me. I don't have whatever. Can you, because I think that is so relevant to
Yeah.
people on this call. Can you speak just briefly to what shifted for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, because I've spent a lot of my career around people like Sean and amazing speakers and these amazing orders. And almost all the time I hear these really crazy stories. Like I started from the bottom, now I'm here.
Yeah,
Right. Like they went through
exactly.
crazy stuff. Like I can't relate to like the struggles that Sean has had that make him an interesting, shaking my screen here, a really interesting character. I've lived a very, I'd say a charmed life. I've got parents who love me. We grew up middle class. I didn't get everything I want, but I got a lot. Made good friends and I made some good choices through my life and I made some bad ones, but it's been a pretty nice life. Like nothing that I thought would be really interesting for people to really pay attention to. And that really kept me for the longest time from getting out there and doing it because I kind of thought like, nobody cares what I have to say unless I'm like crazy interesting story. And I actually interviewed Sean on my podcast several years back, and we went through this, and he actually pulled this out of me. And then when we worked together, he did the same thing. And one of the big things I remember is he was like, "What is one thing in your life that was really, you know, emotional that you wouldn't wish for anybody to have to go through?" Period. Like it doesn't have to be like that painful, but have you ever had an emotional experience, been sad about something or upset? And I was like, yeah, obviously. He's like, what was one? And I said, well, one of them was, you know, when I graduated college, I was this great kid, like straight A's and all this other crap. And I decided I was going to just go work for Disney World for $5 an hour for a while and just take a break between being professional. And my dad almost like disowned me for about a couple of years, barely talked to me because I just disappointed him because he had such high hopes that I was going to go out and be, you know, corporate successful. And I was like, yeah. So we didn't really talk for a couple of years. And he's like, stop. He goes, what do you think people can relate to more? Breaking a couple hundred bones in their body and, you know, living in a wheelchair and all the struggles that Sean had to go through, or having somebody in their life that they love not believe in them
Yeah.
or be disappointed in them. And I was like, damn. He goes, yeah, what did he say? What is most common, or I know he said a phrase for this, but that what is most personal is most common. Like that's one of those universal things that everybody can experience. And he redid my story with that lens on that podcast episode. And I was like, I'll be damned. I'm interested in my story.
Your own
And I never would have
story.
been. Right. And we can't read the label from inside the bottle. It's really, really hard to do until you get like some help or an external perspective to go, here's how I see you. You don't even see you the way I see you. This is the way I see you. And if I see you like this, other people probably do as well. So what that made me realize is a couple things. Number one, it's not about, the story doesn't have to be traumatic. It doesn't have to be dramatic. It should be universal, and it should be relatable at the very least, right? And you can do that in a lot of ways. Sean gives a ton of ways in that program, and I know a lot of the other programs you guys have done together. But the other big thing that I always gave him credit for, he did this privately, and then he did this in the training and at his events. But he said it's the best way to get over with the butterflies or nervousness and anxiety about speaking. He goes, if you find yourself really nervous, like, oh my gosh, right? He goes, well, first of all, ask yourself, do you know what you're talking about? Right? Like, well, if you don't know what you're talking about, you're about to make a fool of yourself. You
right. That's a
shouldn't be
whole
talking.
problem.
So assume that you know what you're talking about. And that's designed to get everybody to go, well, yeah. He goes, okay, cool. So just realize that if you're still nervous, you're being a selfish prick. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, you care more about how you sound to the audience. You care about your ums and your ahs, and is my shirt just right, or did I do this, or do I look polished? You're not caring about the audience who needs to hear your message, whether or not you say the ums and ahs. And if you're not sharing a message you care about, don't share the message. But if you care about it and you think it'll help people, and you're your nerves and anxiety is keeping you from sharing that, you're selfish. Stop it. Right? So I've gotten nervous in the past, and that was a quick little trick that allowed me to go, it's not about you, Brad. It's about them. They need to hear this. And that's also what it's allowed me to create really good speeches in the past with 20 minutes of prep time, because I just realized I don't need a speech. I don't need it to be like this. As long as I care enough and I know the framework for creating a speech that I learned from, you guys' training, then I can deliver something. And if it's not perfect, it's okay, because at least I care enough to kind of get it out. And those were two of the biggest takeaways out of many that I got from the trainings.
Awesome. Brad Costanzo, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, because it's always great to hang out with you. And you also imparted tons of wisdom to this audience. So appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you.